This podcast episode is sponsored by ChiefAIOfficer.com, offering training and certification through the International Association of Chief AI Officers. Interested in a new career or leveling up your value in the marketplace? ChiefAIOfficer.com can help. Welcome to this episode with Sanjay Cherian. We had the opportunity to go deep on enterprise-level generative AI deployments, which is not something that we normally address here. We're usually looking at the SMB, maybe mid-market, but certainly not enterprise. Sanjay had the opportunity for the past 2 years to be the lead at a company that once he reveals it in the podcast episode, everyone will certainly know that company's name. We cover everything from how he got started, considerations that every business owner should be aware of before they hire quote-unquote AI experts to support their business, and the exact areas where you should be focused on starting with the introduction of AI into your business. So get ready for a fantastic episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Using AI at Work. I'm your host, Chris Daigle. Each week, we'll be learning how today's business owners, entrepreneurs, and ambitious professionals are getting more done with smart use of tomorrow's tech. Let's get started. All right, welcome to the episode. Today, I'm excited to have Sanjay Cherian as our guest. He's the founder of 113 Labs, but as you'll find out through the rest of our discussion, his experience is applicable to a lot of us. Sanjay and I were introduced through a mutual friend. We had, at Chief AI Officer, we had done a collaborative product with the folks at growthhackers.com. I met up with the CEO of growthhackers.com recently at a party in Austin for private equity and venture funds that were, just having a social hour. And I was introduced to Sanjay. And when he shared his experience with me, I was like, okay, nice to meet you. And then we further had the privilege of being able to share some seats on a panel recently with the portfolio CEOs from a private equity firm in Austin, which was a fantastic chance for me to learn a little bit more about what he's been up to. But this is going to be a very interesting conversation that's going to address a level of generative AI in business that we really haven't talked about before. So I'm very excited. So Sanjay, welcome to the call.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and excited to have this conversation with you.
Nice. So, before the thing, I said for sure, listen, we got to talk about what you've been doing for the past 2 years because it's sexy and it's and it really does establish the credibility of what you're going to be saying in the rest of the interview. So if you don't mind, just kind of share what the past couple of years, particularly with generative AI, has looked like for you.
Yeah. The past couple of years, I've been at Nike, and everybody kind of knows Nike, and I specifically was in the technology strategy space. I was global head of technology strategy. And right when I got there, this whole boom happened around generative AI specifically, like ChatGPT, in the December of 22, if you will. And I had been playing around with it myself, being a little bit of an early adopter in that space. And, interestingly enough, at Nike, the CEO was, being bombarded with questions from some of his peer CEOs through conferences around this generative AI and what to do in that space. And I took on the initiative of leading our generative AI strategy charge in that space and figuring out now those early days, what do we do? How do we take advantage of this? Is this something that we can take advantage of, particularly across our value chain?
So what was the catalyst for them to get it, to really want to do this? Was it the release of ChatGPT 3.5 or had it been prior to that?
I think it's the release of a consumer grade GPT in ChatGPT definitely, spurred it on. But, I think more so what that ended up doing at the kind of business level, at large enterprise levels, CEOs talk to CEOs, boards talk to board members, And, there was a legitimately, unlike some of the other hype cycles that we've seen with technology like blockchain or NFTs, I think a lot of, operators were talking about how could we actually take advantage of this? Is this something real? And I think some of that came from, can this help with our product innovation and drive, IP, drive, greater, value from that perspective. But I think what we quickly pivoted to is looked at as like, how could it drive productivity in enterprises? So we were asking questions around, how does this make our people, our knowledge workers at Nike, a force multiplier? At the same time, looking at it to say, does it help in our product innovation process? And looking at it from a perspective of productivity, at an angle around being a force multiplier, we looked at various areas of the business, everything from sort of product design to software development to supply chain and other areas, and started looking for use cases of where we could adopt this. Yeah.
So I have to ask, did it enhance? Was it a force multiplier that you expected it to be?
I think so, very much so. I won't sort of go into details around
Sure.
that, but I think that definitely challenges in that space because lots of people were using it on their own. But I think we saw it particularly in areas like in the design space, leveraging design tools, and you see it out there in that space. But we very cautious about it too, in certain respects, like how would that impact the design process, the innovation process, the IP, if you will, which is still kind of like open questions, I think, in the general industry, right? But yeah, and then came the advent of business corporate functions. How do we use this for the knowledge worker? Are there co-pilots that we could leverage from existing partners that the Nike had, for example, in Microsoft, and leveraging some of that? But regardless of the technologies, what all companies are faced with is, how do we use these technologies to drive more value in every day? How do we make things easier so that, people could spend more time on more value added, parts of their job, right? And so, how to use AI in the design space to curate ideas, but not lose the design and creativity, human creativity, in designing a shoe or a shirt, for example, right? And so that's kind of I think the frame that that we had, and I think many companies are grappling with.
So let me ask, where did you go to learn this stuff?
Then thus started a 18-month dive deep into into everything. I actually draw the parallels to the pandemic. I'm actually, funny enough, I've got a background in computer science, but also in molecular biology. And I took virology courses in university. And so I kind of knew what was happening with the COVID pandemic a little bit more than the average person on the street. But at the same time, we all flooded to Twitter, COVID Twitter, to figure out the latest data on, things like that. So similarly, as this was sort of changing on a weekly basis in terms of the advancements of large language models and the accuracy and precision of them, and the new models that were being released by ChatGPT for the consumer, I was basically just enriching myself with teaching myself this right away. There's a number of free courses came out from Google, talking to people, talking to thought leaders in the space. Having been at Nike, we have a lot of access to kind of thought partners from the various consulting firms, but also the various venture capital organizations in that space. And I just basically steeped myself in everything about this. From technical, as much as technical I could, to kind of business transformation and the kind of results that you could achieve from this.
So, I think anybody that's messing around with generative AI in their business, they probably think that they're behind, right? There's just this assumption that, this is, other people are doing, especially with a narrative in the marketplace. What has your experience been with, I guess, comparing where you are, and I would certainly consider you an expert at it at this point for sure, with the conversations that you're having with, you're more of an expert than you might think you are, trust me, with the conversations that you're having with peers at other businesses, at the venture capital, like where you see are they with it? Are they hip to it? Are they just discovering it? Like, kind of where do you see the professionals at?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's a like many of these questions, depends on where you are, what strata of company are you at, where are you in the life cycle, what pressures you're getting from various stakeholders, whether that be your customers, whether that be your board, etc. But I think the story and on value is very much still being developed, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of bias and sense for urgency. And I think it's important to start experimenting and learning, but by no means I think is the value case clear cut yet. I can sort of put it to as the technology is changing. If you look at this from a step back and look at it at a macro level, Sequoia has a great white paper on the value of AI, and their thesis is effectively like, for the investment that we're putting in globally and from a macro level, it's not generating and it's not slated to model out in terms of generating the revenues yet. But I actually think the value of generative AI is more on the productivity and cost saving side right now than it is on revenue generation. I think that will come, and I think there's an opportunity there significant. And as we see the technology change and the models be much more precise and accurate, and we move to even autonomous agents and what they call agentic AI, I think we may be seeing more value. But I think the opportunity for this technology in the business space is around driving automation of tasks that we shouldn't be doing in the kind of as a knowledge worker, things that should be at our fingertips rather, and allowing us to move to more insight and more creativity and more strategy development in these various businesses. And so I think that is the opportunity. And I think there's some very clear-cut use cases in that space.
So based on your experience and obviously the conversations you're having on a daily basis with others on the journey, what are some areas where you think that most companies should, like, it's low risk, low resource requirement to deploy generative AI, high potential impact?
Yeah. So if any of your companies, and look, you have to take what I'm saying in terms of stratification of the company level and size in terms of the value, right? The more you're spending in these areas, obviously, the more value you can generate with some of this. And you have to really look at the business case in terms of investments. And by the way, that's a big learning that I had. Like, really, we at Nike looked at across the value chain of Nike and came up with, about a little bit over 100 use cases, but we really prioritized down to 10 to 15, and then even prioritized more based on investments and business case at that time. And that's something that's dynamically changing in terms of the cost of compute, things like that, when you factor that into business case. But some areas that are kind of low-hanging fruit, software development seems to have empirical evidence now that you can actually drive savings with, co-pilots for software development. And we're seeing, some of the data in general from the industry come out that, senior software engineers are really liking these co-pilots. They're helping with, generic kind of level one type of coding projects and making things go faster. And so that's an area I think, right off the bat. A second area I think is, I'll start kind of like general knowledge worker productivity and getting first drafts, particularly when you have writing use cases. And you can extend this out to more specialized writing in a business like legal drafting, for example, or product briefing drafting, right? Or marketing brief drafting. And the models are getting quite good, especially when you couple them with training on proprietary data to that company. You can get some pretty good second and third level drafts of writing, and that just makes things go a lot faster in a company, in an enterprise setting. So those are some areas that I think are pretty low hanging fruit that companies can figure out how to implement some of these technologies. Even smaller companies leveraging some of these best of breed tools off the that are coming out right now can I think generate some significant force multiplier type of productivity improvement.
So obviously you're many steps ahead of somebody who's listening to this and is like, okay, we're ready to do something, we just don't know what. You mentioned that you guys went through a process to develop 100 plus potential pilot projects. Mm-hmm. What would you recommend to somebody who was at that stage to where they're like, we're ready to go, where do we start?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. Number one is this shouldn't be a technology-led discovery process.
Good
What
point.
do I mean by that? Typically in an organization, the tech, even though this is very promising technology, in order to get the kind of adoption you need at the end of the stage, you need to really start with some people who understand the business. And particularly the business workflow that you're trying to like transform or, for lack of a better term, automate. And I think, one of the things that you should do is think about having kind of a squad and empowering from the top, kind of a business leader to talk to other business leaders in that space to figure out where, to map their business workflows or processes and figure out where can AI or generative AI really add a lot of value. Where are the hotspots that are kind of where you can marry and match the use case with the technology that is coming out there right now. So that I think is a kind of important, first step in terms of, and
I
second
like
step
it.
of identifying who those business champions are, and then spending time with the business to like map out what those use cases are. And then you end up coming to a use case and developing a bit of a library. And then it's a situation of like understanding across kind of three categories, broad categories in my mind, how you analyze those use cases for value. Is this something where the technology can drive, in this sort of 3 years, it can drive productivity improvement? So not necessarily taking costs out, but it'll make that team faster and more productive and allow them to
Yep.
focus on value add. That's one. Is this a case where typically you could actually drive cost savings? You don't need as many people because you've taken that step, you've replaced it with the generative AI or AI, and therefore you don't necessarily have that cost anymore. And I've seen this, happen in like, third party costs, particularly as a company is sort of, outsourcing something that's third party. You can actually drive some of the cost savings that way. And that's hard cost savings. And I think it matters a lot, especially to the company from a labor or SG&A perspective. And the third area is revenue increase, right? Revenue opportunities. And this is where I think we're seeing a lot of promise and opportunity, particularly in the digital commerce side, e-commerce side, where you've got conversational search that's driven by AI that can be implemented on commerce websites to have better and more accurate search functionality, or more virtual conversations with a shopping assistant, for example. And those are things that could increase the conversion of customers buying your products.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the third area. It's a little bit, I think it's still immature. And I think we're seeing, more and more tech every day improve in that area. But I think those are the three things that you would look at and you would assess those use cases along those three dimensions, broadly speaking.
You brought up a good point. And it, reflects on my personal experience. When I first I'd heard about ChatGPT 2 and things like that. And I was like, I wasn't that interested, didn't see an application for it. I was a business development professional. I, was operating at a strategic level, not at a tactical. And it seemed like there was a lot of tactical application. So ChatGPT 3.5 comes out November 2022. And my first thought was, this is going to be a huge opportunity for somebody else. I'm not technical. This is, it's artificial intelligence. And my exposure to it had been in the context of machine learning and data science and things like that. And it just wasn't, and it took a minute before I realized that. And I think companies may be seeing that, but my concern would be that companies would say, hey, Chief Technology Officer, we need you to lead generative AI. And in my opinion, that's the wrong move. And you kind of referenced that at the beginning of your 3 points just a moment ago, where you said it's not a tech-led situation. Kind of share your perspective on the pros and cons of having a business expert versus a technology expert lead the efforts within a company.
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly on this. I sense you're in the same ballpark here in terms of thoughts. The hard part in implementing this top technology is sustaining and getting the adoption and usage, and therefore in those three value categories I mentioned yesterday, capturing that value. That's still going to require humans in the loop and it's going to require people who leverage and use this. I mean, you talked about your case, and as you were talking, I was thinking, man, I felt similarly, but I started using ChatGPT personally to make just life more productive, regular life, not it's more productive, and then I see that now in my business life also as a tool to make it much more productive. But I think that in enterprises and companies, despite the scale and size, this is not something that should be driven from. If you are really caring about the end-to-end value, it's not something that should be driven from the technology organization. I think the technology organization plays a very important part in this, because what we haven't talked about is actually the technology to make it happen, integrating it in a safe way, in a secure way, having the right guardrails, choosing the right technologies. But to me, it's not necessarily, it's going to be similar to like the enterprise software. It's not about choosing the technologies, but what outcome do you want for the business? And I think you really need to have something like a chief AI officer who is much more of a business, who understands business, who understands workflow transformation, who understands kind of value creation cases, and is able to mobilize the organization around an initiative that's really going to drive that value. The technology is just, I think, really accelerates the ability to do this much more so than enterprise SaaS did for enterprise over the last 2-3 decades. I think that, and I think if I can sort of expand just a little bit more on that, is that I think what enterprise SaaS did was create, large data sets or systems of record, but it didn't necessarily integrate it all together. And I think now with AI, particularly agentic AI, you have an ability to take your HR data, your finance data, your services metrics data, legal data, corporate functions, combine that and have agents communicate with each other. And actually the workflow that you had people, talking to, that especially that lower level order workflow where people may be in spreadsheets and, on emails, that is now, automated. And now you can have different conversations. You can have strategic conversations about finance, strategic conversations about talent management. And I think that's what this technology is able to do. So you do need a technologist to make sure that the tech stack is there, and that's right. But this is very much an initiative that was going to really drive transformation in an organization that needs to be led by somebody who's a business leader, who has depth of technology, who has depth of technology, who can call, who can understand quickly and figure out how to translate and work with the CTO's office or the CIO's office to implement that technology that's needed.
That makes sense. So if you were going to go into a company, what would be a department or a role that you might be like, these people tend to be very good at leading that deployment from that chief AI officer kind of paradigm?
Yeah, I think
is that an ops person? Is it what is it?
I'm a little bit of bias. Last 10 years, I've been in operator roles. I think, understanding deeply the operations of a particular business function is important. I think that typically what you see in larger organizations is you have transformation offices or transformation people. That may be a fertile ground to hunt for these people and upskill these people from an AI perspective. I think the other area is kind of like operations. Typically in other organizations, maybe in a when you sort of go down the stack and strata, you have chief operations groups or operations folks. Those are areas where I think they have some technical capability, but they also really know the business very well. They have good relationship management expertise. They're very metric driven and metric oriented, and they live and die by those metrics. And I think those are people who can help and be leaders in this new space.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to learn more about how to start using AI at work, we've made it easy for you. For just $1, you can have full access to the Chief AI Officer community, which will give you additional training, custom software, daily training calls on AI tools, using AI automations, getting more from your ChatGPT sessions, and the business of being an AI consultant. Simply go to chiefaiofficer.com/insiders to accelerate your AI journey. Now, back to the episode. That's good. One of the things that, we certify chief AI officers in our program. One of the things that comment that I get regularly is I'll say, what else have you studied? And people will reference a few of the courses, particularly from universities, well-known universities that have remote learning. And I'll ask them like, that sounds amazing. How was it? And the comment seems to be that they're trying to teach them a lot about machine learning and LLM architecture and things like that, as compared to developing a perspective to evaluate your business operations with an understanding of the capabilities and limitations of generative AI and where it can kind of, not even specifically or tactically, but thematically fit into, oh, in finance, they could probably do this. And so do you think that it's, I don't know, how important would it be for this individual? Let's say you go into a company, they say, we're ready to do this, Sanjay, we need your help. You find the individual, the perfect candidate for this internally within the organization to kind of be your proxy inside, if you're going to be that outsider. How important would you say it was for them to understand that side of generative AI in particular?
The technical side of that, are you saying?
Yeah, like what they would go like. I'm not going to crap on MIT. They're a fantastic institution. However, their generative AI course for leaders, my evaluation of it was that it was kind of technical.
Yeah.
And again, for me, that was a personal impediment. Like, oh, I'm not technical, therefore I'm not going to be good at generative AI. We'll come to find out my understanding of how to scale businesses was the exact skill set that I needed to be able to learn these things. And I'm kind of wanting to address, because again, we don't have people at your level on the podcast regularly. It tends to be SMB environment.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening that are operating at that enterprise level, I want to do as much as I can to have them have that aha about like, oh, I can do, oh, this isn't a big lift kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that, the adult learning programs that are coming out now, they're coming out in droves. UT Austin has one that actually is very much affordable compared to the other ones like Duke and MIT. Look, I think that if you can get really deep into the technicalities of neural networks and large language models and GAN technology and RAG architecture. But at the end of the day, from a business perspective, in terms of what you're trying to do, that level of depth is not necessary, to understand. Like when you're working in a team environment, you can lean on your technology colleagues around that. But more importantly, I think you have to sort of understand what your role in that organization is. If your role is to leverage AI to pivot your product in a way that makes sense and or helps with driving greater growth, you might need to go deep into that technology to figure out where that technology is, at what stage, what's coming, and in order to integrate it into your product, right? And that's typically a lot of these tech organizations. If you're a digital product data technology, leveraging that, I think is you may need to get technical. But if you're more on the operations side and you want to leverage this technology because of its promise in transforming your workflows, taking out costs, driving new revenue generation, that level of depth is a little bit shallower on the technology side, and you should really more focus around, well, how are you going to get the adoption? How are you going to, what partners should you choose, and what, how are you going to remap this process to figure out how you're going to get the technology to take over some of that process step versus the type of technology that you use. That's not really sort of necessary. So like that.
Good
that's
point.
my take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're very much aligned on that. Now, one of the things we talked about was that you've got the exciting opportunity in your career to be able to use the word pivot, right? You're going from an internal role to somebody who is able to advise multiple companies from that more strategic environment. And I'd like to talk about that. I mentioned at the beginning of this, I introduced you as the founder of 113 Labs. Share with me kind of the direction that you want to take with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So 113 Labs, 113 is a bit of a riff on the idea of 1+1 = 3 and to drive synergy. And I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of interest in this space, obviously in generative AI, but at the same time, I think that it's a bit scary for a lot of people and a lot of
Yeah.
companies. And I think
Yeah.
that there's a certain level of demystification. It feels like we've been talking for the last like 5-10 minutes. What kind of expertise do you need in this, and can I do this myself? And
Yes.
having lived this, I think that companies, regardless of your size, don't need to spend a lot of money on expensive management consultants, or for that matter, expensive technology in order to start getting results here. And one thing that I'm really interested in is, how do you, upskill people in your organization so that they can start taking advantage of, so that they can lead this? Because what I'm really, concerned about is like how this is going to impact the workforce. And I think that, as with many other technology transformations, what we want to kind of like avoid is people not like taking this technology and like looking at the next set of jobs, because it's not just about reduction in forces that we're going to see. I think we're going to see a whole new type of job take place, humans in the loop. And we're going to be able to like benefit from this because we're not going to be spent time doing mundane, tedious tasks. So how do you take the people in those organizations and upskill them and make them self-sufficient? And so what we're trying to think about in 113 Labs is, how do you bring some of the strategic thinking, core sort of strategic skills, apply them in AI, and co-deliver projects to get squads in these companies actually rolling up their sleeves and doing this work, and kind of empowering them with our experiences. And me and two other colleagues have started, on the early adoption train in some big brands, and
Nice.
we've got results. And we're coming together and putting a methodology together to help teams and companies do this themselves. And quite frankly, not have them relying on us or any other external consultants to make this happen. And that's kind of like the general thesis that's forming right now. And we think we have a pretty unique co-delivery approach that will help to sustain the adoption. Because a major part is, once you
Yeah.
got the technologies implemented, how do you think about the new world, and how do you think about these teams adopting them? And one thing that's really interesting that we've been talking about is, this is probably a way to kind of create the next generation of leaders in these companies, and then that will trickle down into the organization. And that's kind of like our vision. And I think it's a bit part of the purpose of what we're trying to do with 113, creating that synergy of 1+1 = 3.
So for you guys with 113, you walk in the door, and the first focus is going to be on the strategic upskilling of the decision makers and the executive team.
I think it's first figuring out, like, where in the company can we actually deliver value, right? But equipping a set of leaders, much like a squad or a set of business oriented leaders with some technology and technical savviness to lead that. Like,
Okay.
show them how to create a use case library, show them how to derive an AI business case, and make some difficult decisions or easy or simple decisions. So, right away, and then help them with the kind of AI upskilling training and literacy and governance that you need. I think this is a new space, and I think that there's a lot of early adopter benefit and learnings that these companies can actually implement. And the idea is, like, how do you then upskill these individuals and get them into a level of depth in AI, where, to your point, it's not necessarily a deep technical knowledge set, but how do they use this and apply this in their everyday work, and in the work of their colleagues.
You mentioned a number of times, and we haven't talked about it, and I know that it's very important, especially for the larger companies who are particularly risk averse. But it's the usage policies, the usage arrangements that they've got, combined with that training. Do you have a particular, I don't know, perspective on how a company should approach that side of things?
Yeah, very much so. And this is where I think it can get technical, but not necessarily an understanding of the technology in terms of how it works, but rather how it's applied. So, for what do I mean by that? There's a lot of open source large language models that companies can avail of, and their technology organizations can help get access to. What you want to make sure is that if you're a company that is developing, IP and leverages that data, or there's strategic IP around your business, when you're interacting with these open source large language models, you don't want your data to be committed in the open source. I mean, a tenet of open source technology is it's available to all. But there are ways architecturally, from a technology perspective, to create a walled garden, if you will, where that data is still trained. You're using that data for training, but it's not committed to the open source. So, this is what happens technically, but effectively what you're trying to do here is like you trying to look at data and security around that data in a new way, particularly, using these large language open source models. And I reference that because companies are not going to be able to invest in creating their own foundational models.
Sure.
Most companies are not going to be able to invest in their own foundational models. And when you want to take advantage of that scale, you have to use something that is cost efficient. And so, the security and creating the right kind of guardrails is important. That's the first thing. The second thing is, teaching your people how to use AI and what data to use in training and what not, how to write prompt and what kind of data you should include in prompts and what you should not. And so like having the right kind of literacy around AI for the company, I think is important because that also will help in the implementation, the safe implementation of that, along with some guardrails, but also in more effective use of the AI.
So is that something that you guys would assist a company with, or do you kind of let them figure that out on their own on the guardrail side of things?
Yeah, we have starter kits in that space that that provide a good kind of starter kit around guardrail usage and prompt engineering. But it's really empowering these individuals to sort of expand on that in their particular environment and build off of it.
And then as far as the AI literacy, what time commitment, maybe not dollar amount for upskilling your team, but how much time would you recommend for a client team to spend on a daily, weekly, monthly basis getting the day-to-day users tuned up on how to use it day to day?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that we're living in a time where this is not something that's going to be a lunch and learn, at a company, or necessarily kind of like dedicated training and that's it. This is really about experiential learning. And I think we're going to, if you release this technology in a way that is, with the right kind of security and the right kind of guardrails that we were talking before, I think that the best way to use this is to learn. And I think we're going to see new use cases pop up and iterations. And what? There's this product brief that I'm using. I'm using this technology to write this product brief. There's probably a better way, as if we train this on, the last 5 years of product briefs, for example, and prompted in this way. So that experiential learning, I think, is much more powerful than didactic learning and training environments that we've seen for regular, for historically for other software. And quite frankly, the user interfaces on these new generative AI technologies and tools are so, self-learning.
Accessible.
They're so accessible and self-learning. I really, I tell people we're in this 1996 moment, and that kind of dates me. I'm thinking about like Netscape and, the internet and the accessibility through websites of information. But there's something different here. It's that information's already curated. It's already analyzed. It's already performed, put into a way that makes sense. And then with agents, we're actually not doing the kind of lower level work. And so I think this is a very defining moment. And I'm one that's very skeptical of a lot of technology hype cycles, but I've seen the value in this. And I think that's the learning by doing is very much a tenet here.
I'm particularly interested in how there is some concern by the users about what they might have heard, some doom and gloom stuff, right? And as somebody like you and I, we're very familiar with these tools. And we know that at this stage, AI is not marching in like the Terminator and taking jobs. However, people who are just hearing the Oprah special with Sam Altman or like those sorts of things, there is concern because it's the unknown. It's a new paradigm, and anytime there's something like that that shows up, the uncertainty can be unsettling for the mass of the teams. Right? How are you suggesting that companies manage the narrative from a change, introducing this change without necessarily causing a lot of fear or resistance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a big a big issue in enterprises, because as I talked about, so those three concepts of value, productivity improvement, cost savings, and revenue generation. There are going to be situations where the old way of doing things is no longer in existence. You're going to have the tech, or in some cases robotics, or robotics enhanced with AI, going to take that over. That is inevitable. I think that that is something that that we're going to have to figure out how. I think I'm one who kind of looks at it from more of a optimistic perspective, where how can you use this to create new sources of value, this technology, new sources of value. So far, we've been talking about automating and taking existing workflow and things like that. That's interesting. But I think what's even more interesting is, can the technology be used to create new sources of value, new products, new ways of doing things, like completely. And it's those areas that people have to kind of move to or migrate to in terms of leveraging and learning and using. And look, we've seen this. We've seen technology shifts, and we've seen macro movements of jobs and labor markets move. I think this one has more promise. Let's look at healthcare, for example. We are in the midst of a labor shortage. There's not enough nurses, to withstand, or to be able to support rather, the growing and longer living population. Voice AI and AI navigators to help with navigating, people through healthcare options. Voice and AI to help with, answering questions and providing kind of first order level support that you would go to a pharmacist or a nurse or a nurse practitioner is a new source of value, and it addresses labor shortages. And I think we're going to see more of that happen in the market. But there is going to be a lot of change, and we're going to see a lot of change. It's how you approach this. It's your mindset. It's operating. I've got 3 kids, and I'm constantly talking to them about growth mindsets versus fixed mindsets, and part of that is that mindset, and we have to embody that in our day-to-day work as well when it comes to this technology.
Yeah, that's a part of the deployment framework that I think needs to get dialed in, because my concern would be that if I were going into a company and I didn't vet the individuals who are participating at the pilot project level for their comfort level or fear level of AI, that I might get some false negatives on the results, because an individual who didn't see it that way, had the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, they're not incentivized to do what they think might be obviating their role, right? It's just not necessary anymore. So that's an area that I have a particular interest in, if there was some magic words or something, but I haven't found them yet.
I don't know if there is a silver bullet for that, but spending 25 years in the technology space and being involved in digital transformation, one of the tricks, and maybe it's an old trick now, that I was taught by one of my mentors, is actually using those individuals and making them the leader of the initiative.
Love it.
It's oftentimes the naysayers are the ones who are questioning. Said, well, how would you do it if you wanted to get this kind of outcome? and engaging them in
Yes.
that way, and then putting them in that leadership position. Say, look, you're going to run this initiative or this squad right now, and this is what you do. How would you do it? Here's the technology. But again, it's not about the technology. If we're trying to achieve this
Yes.
outcome and you have these enablers, how would you do it? And I've done that before in my career. In fact, I've been the naysayer who was
Yeah.
like, who was
Yeah.
kicked off like that on one of these initiatives, and it starts getting you thinking about in a different mindset, right?
I think that's a fantastic. I hadn't even considered that, and am eager to test it. So, Sanjay, as we get to the end of this episode, I want to make sure that here's what I know is that there's a lot of companies out there that are looking for advice, for somebody just like, hey, just do it, right? At all levels, everything from I just need a couple of questions answered to we don't even want to get into this. You're the expert, handle it. Um, and they're not having an easy, it's an inefficient marketplace.
Mhm.
There's not, an Upwork where I can go and I can find the experts necessarily like I could with WordPress or, product design or any of that stuff. What would you, how would you, if you were in a business owner's seat right now who is interested in doing this at any level, whether it was a small to medium business, mid-market, all the way up to enterprise, what would you look for in that quote unquote expert to come and help you?
Yeah. Well, I would look for practical experience. Like, have they done this already?
Sure. Yeah.
Or versus a talking head and somebody who's kind of on
Yeah.
on Twitter, looking at like Twitter. Have they done this before? Have they been in the trenches? The second thing I would look at is are they proposing and value right away? Like, are they giving you sort of some actionable ideas to go after? I'm advising a couple of different boards right now that I'm on, particularly on their product, and like thinking about this. And it's interesting how even like CTOs and CEOs, this is new for them, and trying to figure out the linkage
Yeah.
with the business value. They're much more focused on like talking to vendors and hearing what Microsoft is selling in AI or Google or AWS. But there isn't that sort of linkage. So I would sort of understand like how can you like drive operational business value? That's the second thing I would look for. Those two things I think are kind of like, for me, if I was a CEO or a board member, I'd be looking to some level of practical experience with this technology. So it builds some bona fide, and second, like time to value. This is not something that should be a 16-week consulting engagement and you're given a report.
Interesting.
You need to like get in there and do this. I would add the third thing. Get somebody who's, if you're looking for this help and advice, somebody who can get your people engaged and get a squad or a team around this to start implementing. This information is not something that should be kind of housed in some kind of subject matter expert. This is something
Agreed.
that be day to day, and you as an organization have to kind of build this muscle internally and let it diffuse in the rest of the organization. And there's an argument to have a chief AI officer or a squad or a team that will help diffuse that. So I think that's important. Those are three things to look for.
So, obviously, if those aren't present, those are red flags. Would there be any other red flags that you would advise the business owners to be looking out for that expert that they're hiring?
Yeah, like red flags are kind of like deep investment in the technology first. I got to buy the whole tech stack.
Good point. Yep.
I've got to sign up for these kind of seats. Look, I think you're going to have to spend, investment in technology, but I think it's, understanding the business value, having at least a high level case of, if we invest this is the kind of return we want. And by the way, we got to have those business units on the hook. They got to be bought in, right? We're going to invest this. We got to be bought in. So, as opposed to like, okay, if we can set you up with, 1,000 seats with this license of Copilot for this, you're going to see value soon. I think that's a little bit of a red flag to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a very similar perspective. somebody was saying, is it worth it for us to get all these Copilot licenses? And the answer that I heard that made the most sense was, if you don't train the people how to use it, it's not worth it. If you train the people how to use it, heck yeah, it's worth the 20 or 30 bucks per month if they're using it, right? So that was a fantastic answer. Now, for individuals who are like, they've liked what they've heard and they're not necessarily wanting to strike out on their own and figure this stuff out and do what you had to do 2 years ago and get the information wherever you could. If they wanted to reach out and connect with 113 about some solutions, what does that process look like for them?
Happy to connect with them. I can leave you my contact information and connect with folks as they please. I'm happy. Look, this is not some kind of knowledge that I want to sort of keep to myself. I think that the more and more people kind of and I'm happy to sort of share even my kind of personal knowledge gating plan around this, and the websites and the people podcasts and the papers that I started going deep on. I went through some significant rabbit holes, but it was very interesting and I think very necessary. But happy to share my contact information with your listeners and connect for sure.
I'd love to be able to give them that, and also any place on social where you seem to have your where you shine the brightest. I guess I'd love for them to be able to follow you, because I think what you're doing, especially from where you're coming from with it, you've been doing this for a couple of years in an environment where it really mattered if you did it right or wrong, right? Yeah. It wasn't just an experiment kind of thing. It had major impact. And there's not a lot of people and I talk to a lot of people in this space at all levels. There's not a lot of people who have done that. And you referenced this earlier. I used to be one of those guys at the big consulting firms that got paid a lot of money. And I was a little surprised at how much they were charging for how little I knew. That's just the big secret, right? And I think that it's important for companies to know that if they have the big budgets, you're at least not getting somewhere up that chain of command in those consultancies. Somebody knows something. It may not necessarily be the person sitting in your office today, though. With you guys, that's not the case. You are that person that it would have gotten rolled up to if there was a big situation, because you've been there and you've figured it out. And that's like you said, I mean, the experience that an individual brings to the table on this makes it, the learning curve isn't discovered on the client.
Yes.
It's already been handled. And I think that's a best case scenario. That's
a really important point what you just said there, especially that the learning curve is not at the client. And because it's so new, look, nothing to, I was at Accenture for over a decade, and nothing to take away. They do have experts.
Exactly.
Really good. But this is so new that it really depends on, like you said, who's in front of you and how deep they have gone. And the end value of clients who are deep into this is still very small on the grand scale of things. And, there's ways that you can benefit, in this space without necessarily investing significant amounts in big brand consulting firms. I can tell you,
this has been fantastic.
When we were deep into this, I actually called 6 or 7 consulting partners to come and tell us what they knew about this space, because I was developing a primer on it, and it wasn't much different from our teams. At that time. Now, look, they've invested a lot. I'm not taking anything away from them. They're great firms, but this is in a new way democratized. The technology democratizes itself for you to use. If you've ever used of any consumer grade, AI technology, whether it be Perplexity AI or ChatGPT or the various now slew of software that's available to the students. We haven't even talked about that, but to kind of high school and college students, it's becoming very mainstream. Right
crazy.
Now.
Yeah. The future's exciting.
Yes.
Well, Sanjay, thank you so much for taking the time, and I know that you're busy, and I'm going to provide all the contact information for Sanjay and 113 in the show notes, and I look forward to hearing big things about what you guys are up to.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Using AI at Work. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations about how to use AI at work. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Chief AI Officer, for empowering businesses with AI education and training. Visit their website for a free AI readiness assessment and AI strategy guide to help you get started using AI at work. That's www.chiefaiofficer.com. Special thanks to our producer, Evan DeSaulnier, for making this episode possible. Follow us on Twitter at the handle Using AI at Work, and visit www.usingaiatwork.com for free resources to help you harness AI in your role.